Welcome back to our series on using your Sophos XG. My name is John, and I'm a support technician with Management Concepts. In this video, we will be going over a feature called traffic shaping. If you're unsure of what that is, in short, it's creating and applying policies that can limit or guarantee bandwidth to certain things. This can be used as such that you want to guarantee your IT staff a certain amount of bandwidth, so they can keep things running smoothly, or to your sales department, keep those sales flowing in. Or maybe you want to limit the bandwidth of your guest network or marketing department. So, as the first step from previous videos, we're going to go ahead and log into Sophos Firewall. From there, we're going to look to the navigation tree on the left down to the System Services and click on that. When the System Services comes up, we'll navigate to the Traffic Shaping tab at the top. From this menu, you'll find several columns to look at and a handful of pre-generated traffic shaping policies. Let's talk about the columns that you see here first before moving on. The first column I'm going to start with is on the restriction type. In this column, you can see what the policy is applying to and how it's applying itself. The next is up/down bandwidth. This column is when you set the policy to apply the traffic shaping speed to be the same for uploads and download speeds. The following two columns, upload bandwidth and download bandwidth, reflect that you have set them to be separate speeds. Let's go into these with a little more detail by creating a policy, which I'll do by clicking the Add button. From here, we'll put in the name for the policy, which for now I'll use test as the name. Following the name is the policy association. Policy association reflects what you're targeting with that policy. I'll give you a rundown of each option that is available. A user's policy is used when you are applying this to a single user or user group. This can be found by navigating to the authentication section, and from there, either the user tab for individual policy application or groups tab if you want to apply the policy to a group of users. For example, this could be used to limit the maximum bandwidth of your sales department users during the week when everyone is out of the office and bandwidth is spread out among all of your employees. But when on the weekends, you could remove that limitation since almost everyone in the office is gone for the weekend. A rules policy is used when you are applying it to one of your firewall rules, which can be in the firewall section. For example, you have a rule for your guest network on the firewall, and you want it to have a limited bandwidth so your guests or customers can still have the internet but not hog any of it. This is the kind of policy you'd want to select. A web categories policy limits the bandwidth of the categories that you normally apply to a web filter. If you navigate to Web and then to Categories tab, you can click the edit symbol next to any of the categories found there. Upon doing so, you can then apply a traffic shaping policy to it. So, for example, you could set video streaming or social media sites to lower bandwidth, so even if people were to go to them, they couldn't soak up the internet speed of others. Next is an application-based policy. This one is pretty straightforward. What this does is limit the bandwidth usage of specific applications people are using on their computers or other devices managed by the firewall. As an example, an employee brings in his or her own cell phone and uses it to stream music via the music streaming service Spotify. Now, while you may not be bothered by the fact they are listening to music, nevertheless, you still want to keep it from soaking bandwidth. To find where to apply that, you'll click the Applications from the navigation tree and then click the Traffic Shaping Default tab. After that, click the Expand button for streaming media and scroll down to Spotify. There, you'll click the Edit button. From this new Edit menu, you can apply the traffic shaping policy and save it. Okay, now we're done bouncing around, but I wanted to let you know where to apply the traffic shaping policies for each of those types. So, let's get back to the creation screen for traffic shaping policy. I'll once more type in the test name, and I'm going to select Rules for Policy Association. Now, after Policy Association, we have rule types. The first type is Limit. This type is really simple. When you go to the limit line below, you would enter the maximum bandwidth you would allow, and the natural minimum is 1 kilobyte per second. When you are only setting a maximum allowed bandwidth usage, you should use the limit rule type. The second rule type is guarantee. Make note that when you select guarantee, you'll now have a second box on the limit line. With the addition of the second box in the limit line, you can now set a minimum bandwidth that the policy will guarantee to the object you're applying it to. For example, you want to make sure that the folks in marketing department have at least 2,000 kilobytes per second of bandwidth and a maximum of 10 kilobytes per second. With those numbers in place, no matter what, if it's available, the folks in marketing will have at least 2,000 kilobytes per second for their bandwidth. For my test, I'm going to set mine to limit and set the limit to 10,000. Next, after rule types, is limit upload/download separately. This I touched on briefly when I was explaining the columns of the previous screen. By selecting disable, you'll keep both upload and download speeds identical. If you choose to enable this, you could limit the upload speed separate from the download. An example of this would be that you don't want to give your sales any more download speed, as Jimmy in the department is prone to updating his software at the most inopportune moments. But you need to increase the upload speed because the department is moving large quantities of files to the cloud for backup. You could create a policy to help facilitate that. As for the test, I'm going to keep this disabled, so they are the same. Following that will be priority. Priorities are set as such that 0 is the most important and 7 is the least important. You can set a level of priority so that if you have, for example, a sales traffic shaping policy and a general traffic shaping policy for your internet, you could set the sales policy to have a higher, in this case a lower number, priority so that when bandwidth is in a crunch, your sales department will receive the bandwidth before others that reside under your traffic shaping policy. For this test policy, I'm going to set mine to 4. After that, we'll have to decide whether this will occur individually by user or as a whole for the policy. To give you an example, this test policy I'm creating is going to be applied to my basic internet rule. If I set it for the individual, then each individual user that is affected by the firewall rule will each have a limit of 10,000 kilobytes per second. But if I set it to shared, that means that of all the traffic going through that rule, only a maximum of 10,000 kilobytes per second can be accessed through it. That means everybody would have a maximum in total of 10,000 kilobytes per second to access it. This could be a good thing if applied to a guest network or a group of users, but you wouldn't want to apply it to your general internet traffic. So for my test policy, I'm going to set it to individual so that each user has a maximum of 10,000 kilobytes per second, but not guaranteed any. Finally, the last thing I want to show you before completing this policy is the schedule section at the bottom. What this can do is add an exception to the rule above. This is great when you want to give weekend users a greater bandwidth usage because hardly anyone is there, but to return to normal during the work week. By clicking the Add button, you'll be brought to a screen with a shorter list of options to choose. So for my example, I'm going to give users double the limit on weekends. To do this, I'll set it to limit. Then in the limit text box, I'll put in 20,000 kilobytes per second. And lastly, set the schedule to all time on weekends. I then click Save. Now the next step will depend on the traffic shaping policy you create. Each one has a place to go to where you can set the policy based on the policy association you selected. If I were to apply mine, I would need to go to the firewall rules and apply it to the relevant firewall rule. But that is where we'll wrap up this video today. Next time, I'll be going over reports, where to find them, and how to make use of them. Until then, you have a great day and a great night.